All right, here we go. Section 3 of the notes now for Chapter 10, last video for the chapter, talking about issues in news management. First off, there is this steady erosion of the news audience. Audience levels for local television news have been declining in recent years as more people access news from mobile and alternative sources. Now, some folks are using the online and mobile versions of the news of the television stations. So that's one way that the brand recognition is really helping them. But at the same time, the overall ratings for the news product is declining because people have not been tuning in. In addition to those that just have been shunning broadcast television altogether in favor of streaming, there's the fact that many of us these days are not necessarily working a 9-to-5 kind of job, and we're not predictably home to tune in and watch television at the normal times that we would expect to see news. Convergence efforts. Many electronic media newsrooms around the country have attempted various forms of converging news operations with other media, notably print and digital. It was quite a thing for a while for a news station to partner themselves up with a local newspaper and or with the prominent news radio station in the area and do some various collaborations and have reporters for one news source provide information and do reports on behalf of the other platform. But we are seeing that while those partnerships, they still exist in certain ways, for the most part, we're not really seeing that being pushed as something that is an asset that they promote over the airwaves these days. There's been a lot of conflict within the different organizations in terms of control of the content, different agreements on what's acceptable and not acceptable, and those sort of things. So for the most part, convergence, it's still there, but it's not as prominent. Negotiations with news talent. An agent often represents talent in contractual negotiations in larger markets. In exchange, the talent shares a portion of his or her salary, usually going to be around 10% of what he or she makes. That's going to be the agent's commission. Talent may also negotiate clothing, makeup, and hair allowances to add to their regular salaries. If you watch the end of a newscast, sometimes it will say that a certain anchor's wardrobe is provided by such and such clothing line or such and such boutique. And those are things that a station will trade out. That winds up being the benefit for a reporter or an anchor. Many contracts contain what is referred to as a non-compete clause that specifies the length of time employees must remain off the air in the market if they leave their position. Non-competes are common in many different on-air capacities, and more so nowadays, even in positions that don't require someone to be on the air. There's a lot more emphasis now on proprietary secrets within a media company, that they would just prefer that you not jump ship to another media company right away, especially another media company within a particular market. Now, in some states, the non-compete clause is not enforceable. So that's something that if you go to work in a particular state, you may want to check the law as to whether a non-compete clause can be pushed on you when you go to work for a particular place as a condition of employment. But there are a few states where that cannot happen to you. Ratings and sweeps. In television news, sweeps is the critical time period for assessing viewer trends. Basically, what happens is during sweeps, television stations will pay especially close attention to their ratings numbers, and the ratings numbers during sweeps is generally how they set their advertising rates based on the numbers during that sweeps period. TV sweeps are held 4 times a year during the months of February, May, July, and November. But adjustments to this schedule sometimes take place due to recurring events like major election cycles, the Olympics, other significant events that may happen. So, by and large, these 4 different periods throughout the year are generally going to be the times that they really, really pay attention and really try to do things to bring more viewers into the station, not just in news, but across the broadcast day. But in news in particular, that's when you're going to find that organizations are going to make more of an effort in the storytelling that they do. They might run a special series on a certain topic. They may have special reports on various sorts of investigations or a focus on something of particular interest to the community. Those are things that a news station may do in its role in trying to build up ratings during sweeps. There's pros and cons to that. Sometimes news outlets will really, really push community efforts and make that a significant time for them to serve the public interest. Other stations tend to go for the more sensational stories to try to bring the weird and the outrageous to viewers in hopes that they'll tune in. News ethics. Ethical confrontations can occur in several areas of news gathering and delivery. Some of the issues might include things like live shots. They're a key feature of local news, but they raise the question of whether live shots are truly needed or even desired by the audience, depending on the story that's being told. Is it important for a reporter to be on location of where a recent shooting happened, for example? Is it important for a reporter to stand outside a government building when later on in the day there's going to be some sort of meeting or special event that's going to happen in that building? That's a contention that especially early morning news people deal with when they stand outside a government building at 5 o'clock in the morning to tell you about a proclamation that's going to happen at 2 o'clock later that day. Is that really that necessary? However, the live shot also creates a sense of presence, a sense of location, and gives the sense that the news operation is out and about right there where news has happened or is about to happen. Increased use of helicopters and nowadays drones flying in the sky, capturing the scenes of what's happening as it's happening. Is that important to do? How valuable is it to do? Some people question that, but there are certain scenarios where having that eye in the sky has gathered viewers and gathered ratings. The use of hidden miniature cameras to collect material that traditional camera crews would be unable to obtain. This is used a lot in so-called investigative recording. One thing to keep in mind is that if you are recording someone without their knowledge that they're being recorded, in some states that is illegal. You need to check the law on that before you move forward with something like that. Fourthly, presenting material fairly and accurately is a constant challenge for reporters. News directors must demand accurate background research, fact-checking, and corroboration of source material before stories are broadcast or distributed via digital platforms. It's that age-old debate if you want to get it out there. Do you want to get it out first, or do you want to get it out right? Ideally, you want to do both, but there are many news outlets that have gotten themselves caught putting information out that was not accurate because they rushed to get the information out on the airwaves to be able to say they got it out first, but they didn't verify the sources in a proper way and wound up putting out misinformation. Race and ethnicity issues. There was a document put out in the year 2000 Best practices for television journalists. This report called for a system to create better balance in the presentation of news stories, as well as establishing in-house diversity councils to monitor and evaluate the production and presentation of the news. So this report covered not just the employee makeup of the news departments of television stations, but it also had a focus on what sort of stories were being covered by the news and of the particular interest to various groups that the television station was serving in its geographic area. The Radio Television Digital News Association, the RTDNA website, is one resource for members to consult for diversity and other issues. The website address is in your notes, and I would encourage you to check that out. Bottom line here is that newsrooms must reflect the market, and the industry must take on different hiring practices. So the people that you see on television should ideally be representative of the people that live in the area. While you do want to have the best people working in your newsroom to have journalistic excellence and the wherewithal to be able to put a newscast together, you also want the people to be able to represent the people that you are broadcasting to, so that there is that sense of that hometown feel and that connection with the news organization, with the people that they are trying to reach out in the audience. Unions and union contracts. While actual negotiations with unions are likely to be handled by the general manager or maybe an operations manager, the news director is also likely going to be involved because of the importance to the overall news operation. If a station has a news operation, it is most likely the most prominent and most recognizable part of the station to the local audience. So it's important in that way. And because of that, and because of the amount of money invested in news and the amount of money generated by advertising on local news, news director is going to need to have significant input as to how to handle things with the employees and with any unions or guilds that affect the news product. One clear responsibility in unionized news operations is to make sure that people do not deviate from their job responsibilities. Many times, as part of the union contract, there's going to be rather specific job descriptions. And there's going to be an emphasis that the people that were hired to do certain jobs are the people that should do those jobs and not somebody else. In other words, if you're a camera operator, your job is to operate the camera. If your job is to be an editor, your job is to edit. And those roles should not cross over from one into the other. You can make arguments as to whether that should be a thing or not. What's the big deal if someone helps someone else out or steps in on something? But to the unions and those that argue that it takes specialized people to do specialized tasks, it is a significant issue. And with that, we're going to close up Chapter 10. Finish up the notes and study questions. Get them submitted. Bring your questions to Blackboard. Fill out that survey. Bring your questions with you to class as well as we talk about the news. All that matters. All that's fit to broadcast. And why we need to care about the quality of the product. We'll talk about all that when we get together for class.